Why are Trump and Boris so happy to risk a recession? The truth is hidden by a trick that quietly transfers your money to the super rich. CEOs earn hundreds of times more than their average workers. Trump and Boris want to support these job creators by cutting regulations and taxes. But studies have flipped some of our basic assumptions about money. The highest paid CEOs are consistently the worst performers. And the most overpaid CEOs perform even worse, actually destroying shareholder value. Overconfident, they may surround themselves with yes men and refuse to reverse bad decisions. Now, who does that sound like? Another study found that CEOs who won awards went on to perform poorly, well below average. And the awards hide another secret. A string of studies has shown that CEOs have surprisingly little impact on the success of their companies. One study measured their influence at just 4 to 5%. For CEOs, overconfidence is blinding, but also crucial to their perceived value. Studies show that people focus more on confidence than performance. There's no evidence that Jim Cramer is more accurate than other pundits, but look at his confidence.
Okay, Peter writes, should I be worried about Bear Stearns in terms of liquidity and get my money out of there? No, no, no. Bear Stearns is fine. Do not take your money out. This is real. If there's one takeaway other than a plus 400 somebody, Bear Stearns is not in trouble. I mean, if anything, they're more likely to be taken over. Don't move your money from Bear. That's just being silly. Don't be silly.
The following week, Bear Stearns collapsed. John Oliver had some fun replacing the sounds of Cramer's decisive red buttons.
Pay back their unhappy clients. Things keep working out. Is it any wonder that Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific keep running? Buy high and then sell low. A time-honored way to lose money.
Trump is an icon of overconfidence.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me. I know more about courts than any human being on earth. Nobody knows more about trade than me. I know more about steelworkers than anybody that's ever run for office. Nobody knows more about construction than I do. I know more about drones than anybody. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, helped him find fame. It was written as a memoir, but the true author, Tony Schwartz, said Trump played no role in writing it.
I felt guilty about writing The Art of the Deal with Trump for 30 years. Who would have possibly guessed at the time that it would be such a consequential decision? I created the Donald Trump he wished to be. I wrote every word of that book with no engagement with him. He is spectacularly uninformed and ignorant. I don't believe he has read a book in his adult life.
Who are your favorite authors?
Well, I have a number of favorite authors. I think Tom Wolfe is excellent.
Did you read Vanity of the Bonfires?
I did not.
It's a phenomenal book.
What book are you reading now?
Well, I'm reading,
Bonfire of the Vanities.
I'm reading my own book again because I think it's so fantastic, Tom.
What's the best book you've read beside Art of the Deal?
I really like Tom Wolfe's last book, and I think he's a great author. He's done a beautiful job.
Which book?
His current book. His current book. It's just out.
Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yes, and the man has done a very, very good job. And I really can't hear with his earphone, by the way.
Schwartz described the book as his greatest regret in life and called for it to be recategorized as fiction. Trump trades on the perception of success.
Everything I've done virtually has been a tremendous success.
Trump Shuttle, which no longer exists, Trump Vodka, which was discontinued, Trump Magazine, which folded, Trump World Magazine, which also folded, Trump University, over which he's being sued, and of course, the travel booking site GoTrump.com, whose brief existence was, I imagine, a real thorn in the side of anyone hoping GotRump.com featured a single thing worth masturbating to.
He is paid to put his name on buildings. Trump Tower skips 10 floors so that the higher floors sound more impressive.
Mr. Trump, with the exception of your family, have you ever been told no?
Oh, many times. I've been told no by him. No, many times. I mean, my whole life really has been a no, and I fought through it. I have been, and you know, I talk about it. It's not been easy for me. It has not been easy for me. And, you know, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million.
An investigation found the loan was in fact $60 million, or $140 million in today's money. The illusion of control is the CEO's best friend. It is also the president's best friend.
Our economy is doing great. We're having a little spat with China, and we'll win it.
Despite Obama and Trump's starkly different approaches, economic growth has continued in a straight line. In fact, despite Trump's tax cut, Obama's economy created more jobs in the same period. But Trump's corporate America first policies have boosted two things: the deficit and pollution. Air pollution kills around 107,000 people in the US each year. As Trump removes regulations, unhealthy air days are rising. His team even questioned the health impact of pollution. A former EPA official likened this to big tobacco's denial of health effects. The World Health Organization has said that air pollution is the new tobacco, causing 7 million deaths around the world and harming billions more. It has been linked to miscarriage, dementia, heart disease, and lower intelligence. The UK government has been repeatedly fined for failing to meet EU air quality standards. Boris paints EU regulations as a barrier to success, but can't seem to name one.
This kipper, which has been presented to me just now by the editor of a national newspaper, who received it from a kipper smoker in the Isle of Man, who is utterly furious because after decades of sending kippers like this through the post, he has had his costs massively increased by Brussels bureaucrats who have insisted that each kipper must be accompanied by a plastic ice pillow. Pointless, expensive, environmentally damaging elfin safety.
It is, in fact, a UK rule.
We could also get rid of so much of the pointless rules and regulations that are holding back this country. This gentleman here mentions bananas. It is absurd that we are told that you cannot sell bananas in bunches of more than 2 or 3 bananas. You cannot sell bananas with abnormal curvature of the fingers.
In truth, Boris, like Trump, wants to reduce the taxes and responsibilities of the wealthy. The real fart of the deal is the myth that all this is fair because we earn what we are worth. Research has found nothing special about CEOs except, well, their height. They are on average 3 inches taller. CEO pay isn't based on competition or results, it's based on perceptions. And the same could be said of many professions. A historian points out the only true solution.
1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, I mean, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water, right? We gotta be talking about taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it, taxes, taxes, taxes. All the rest is bullshit.
Boris and Trump are masters of distracting bullshit. Boris didn't campaign for a hard Brexit.
So how would you vote tomorrow if there was a referendum?
I'd vote to stay in the single market. I'm in favour of the single market. I want us to be able to trade freely.
But a hard Brexit was a path to power, tax cuts and deregulation. For Trump, it was China.
China. China. China. China. China. China. China. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world.
Trump's tax cut helped the world's largest company, Amazon, to avoid paying any federal income tax on $11 billion of profit. Many companies used the tax savings to repurchase shares, boosting the bonuses of executives who then sold shares. Oracle's CEO made $250 million. It's a familiar story. Over 8 years, America's 92 most consistently profitable tax-dodging firms cut jobs by 1%, compared with the average job growth of 6%. And the CEOs of those 92 firms received particularly large pay rises. Lower corporate taxes boosted executive salaries, not jobs. But what happens when workers get a pay rise? When Henry Ford paid his workers $5 a day, double the typical manufacturing salary at the time, it paid off dramatically for the company. Ford called it one of his finest cost-cutting moves. Studies show that when workers receive a pay rise, they work harder, boosting productivity. This enlightened self-interest is in short supply. Economists agree that Brexit and Trump's trade war are major recession risks. But unlike taxes and regulations, recessions don't change the game. In the 3 years following the Great Recession, the top 1% saw its income rise by 31%, while the rest remained frozen in place. Sensing that the game was rigged, some later voted for Trump and Brexit. And they are now asked to lead the charge towards lower taxes for the wealthy and a mountain of national debt which will intensify the next recession. But a rebellion has begun. When officials offered Amazon a $3 billion tax break to build its headquarters in New York, the people stepped in.
We want to make sure that they know that this community is going to stand up and fight against this deal.
The world's biggest company just got sent packing thanks to an unfriendly welcome by New Yorkers.
We should not have a regressive tax system in which large, profitable corporations like Amazon pay nothing in federal income taxes.
People will take to the streets to demand a vote on the Brexit deal. Boris has tried to silence Parliament and the people, but we will be heard. And the Extinction Rebellion will occupy cities around the world. Global animal populations have dropped 60% since 1970. And scientists warn that we'll be next. Protesters want a jury-like system to weigh the evidence and make decisions without corporate influence. You can also join our little rebellion to help spread the truth. Let's not leave it to these guys.
This is a tough hurricane. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
China has total respect for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump's very, very large brain.
Our next Brexit Bullshit Award goes to Boris for successfully lying his way to the top of Bullshit Mountain.
Crikey, this honour.
We'll post Boris's full acceptance speech to Patreon to thank you for your support. Researchers can identify conservatives and liberals by scanning their brains. Liberal brain activity indicates more empathy.
Now to the protests erupting coast to coast over conditions at those migrant detention centers. The outrage this morning growing.
While conservatives have larger amygdalas focused on detecting threats.
Build that wall! Build that wall!
Could our brains explain our reactions to Trump's racism?
It's a racist thing to tell a black or a brown person to go back to a country they came from.
No.
How much does our biology shape our views? Studies have found surprising answers and even identified the best words to bridge the gap. Political polarization has been rising for decades. Increasing numbers see the other side as a national threat and don't want to talk to them or live among them. A striking number would be unhappy if a family member married someone from the wrong party. How much of this is the sorting of similar brains? A study followed thousands of twins, some with similar genes and some with identical genes. Any differences that emerged between the two groups of twins would likely be down to biology. The study estimated that 30 to 40% of our political leanings are genetic.
We used to think that after childhood, the brain really could not change. And it turns out that nothing could be farther from the truth. Every time you learn a new fact or skill, you change your brain. So people who read Braille, they have larger hand sensory areas in their brain than those of us who don't.
One theory is that conservative brains evolved to defend territory from attack and disease, while liberal brains were explorers.
You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
An experiment tracked people's eyes as they looked at an array of images. Conservatives focused on threatening or disgusting images, while liberals had a stronger response to flowers and rabbits. When shown ambiguous expressions, conservatives perceive more threatening emotion.
When you looked at that bridge loaded up with people, that's called an invasion of our country.
In another experiment, people watched colored beans fly past on a screen. They didn't know if clicking the beans would win or lose them money. Democrat brains clicked on more beans and lost more money as a result. They have an appetite for information, and they see strangers as an opportunity, while conservatives see more of a threat.
Build that wall. Build that wall.
An early community of conservative brains would stagnate and starve, while liberal brains might meet their end at a magic mushroom cliff diving party. There are tantalizing indications that gene variants may drive social participation at both ends of the spectrum, encouraging collaboration. Knowing that our differences are partly based in biology may make them easier to tolerate. We might be more aware of manipulation. Neuroscientist Bobby Azarian says racism is a failure of the more rational prefrontal cortex to control the impulsive amygdala. And Trump is betting on the amygdalas.
They are serving this country. They were elected to serve America.
Very simple.
They are American citizens.
I said make room for someone who wants to be.
Listen, I got a news flash for both of you. This is what this election is going to be about. When the president said, yeah, we got a plan for health care, but I'm going to give it to you after the election, he was telling you the truth.
The internet doesn't help. Echo chambers create a march to the extremes, encouraged by subversive forces. It's estimated that 30% of active Facebook accounts are fake, designed to look and act like the people they want to influence. Their goals are to sow division or to attract clicks through divisive content. One study paid people to follow bots that retweeted people from other parties. This actually increased polarization. Mixing, offline, is a moderating force, but social networks flip this trend. In the hostile online environment, the messages needed more careful tuning. One experiment found an effective approach. 3 groups were given articles about the environment. One article explained that we are causing real harm to the environment. Another spoke of keeping our water and skies pure and described pollution as disgusting. And a control group were given a non-political article. Liberals already supported environmental policies, so the articles made little difference. But conservatives were more supportive of policies to protect the environment if they had read the moral purity article. They were also more likely to say that they believed in global warming, even though it wasn't mentioned in the article. If you want to convince someone, speak to their underlying values. Liberals prioritize equality and care, while conservatives focus more on loyalty, authority, and purity. When Trump talks of invasion and infestation, he appeals to primal instincts, enabling him to subvert true conservative values by driving up the national debt with a corporate tax cut.
El Paso, Texas, say they're responding to an active shooter.
It is an invasion, you know that. I say invasion, they say, isn't that terrible?
The letter states this attack is in response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. They are the instigators, he wrote, not me. I'm simply defending my country from cultural and ethnic replacement brought on by an invasion.
Yes, we've had a rise in hate crimes every single one of the last 3 years. During an administration where you have a president who's called Mexicans rapists and criminals, though Mexican immigrants commit crimes at a far lower rate than those born here in the country, he has tried to make us afraid of them.
I've had the FBI director repeatedly testify that the white supremacist, white nationalist threat is now much more frequent and likely to occur in this country and manifest itself in the form of terrorism than any other form of extremism.
We now know what they did in response to that massacre is that the president's campaign affirmed that, in fact, they're still going to leave up their millions of dollars worth of Facebook ads that rail about an invasion of immigrants at the border, just like the El Paso shooter's diatribe said.
I got to ask you a question. I do not believe in, I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you. Thank you.
Happy birthday. Jody's first 3 years were textbook normal. Happy birthday, dear Jody. Then, about 6 weeks after her 3rd birthday, a storm of epileptic seizures took control of her brain. Jody would lose almost all of her right hemisphere, and the cavity would fill with cerebrospinal fluid.
What we're looking at here is an image, an MRI, that was done on Jody after her surgery. And what it shows us is the fact that we removed her entire right hemisphere.
But how could Jody function normally with only one hemisphere? It's because of a miraculous ability of the brain called plasticity. Our brains can actually change shape, creating new connections between neurons or brain cells to replace lost or damaged ones. Jody's left brain started reconnecting almost immediately.
Everything you encounter and everything you experience is changing your brain, and that can be for better, but it can also be for worse. So when you leave today, go out and build the brain you want.
It's safer to pick the best ideas from both sides. Although you may take some flack, as I did, when teaming up with Jordan Peterson to argue against political correctness.
I've been given huge grief already simply because I'm standing here next to Professor Peterson, which is the very reason that I am standing here in the first place. I'm standing next to someone with whom I have, differences, shall we say, in terms of politics and all kinds of other things, precisely because I think all this has got to stop. This rage, resentment, hostility, intolerance, above all this with us or against us, certainty. A Grand Canyon has opened up in our world. The fissure, the crack, grows wider every day. I think it's time for this toxic, binary, zero-sum madness to stop before we destroy ourselves. And I would like this quotation from my hero Bertrand Russell to hover over the evening. One of the painful things about our time is that those who feel certainty are stupid, and those with any imagination and understanding are filled with doubt and indecision. Let doubt prevail.
Now, I'm wondering if you can change my mind about something. The best Democratic candidate. I think it might be Elizabeth Warren, but I'm not sure. Head over to changeaview.com, which supported this
It's important
video.
to grasp that we have two futures ahead of us. They are, things get much better, we address climate change, we ensure that automation doesn't lead to rising inequality, or things get much worse. We have runaway climate change, where the global south is locked out from development. What if we could feed a world of 10 billion people, not just the bare minimum, but champagne, lobster and Kobe steak? What if we could not just house everybody, but house them in luxury? Ensure lifelong education, free public transport, and the means for each person to live precisely the life they want to live. This is not science fiction. Those technologies are already here. Whether it's synthetic biology and healthcare, cellular agriculture and meat without animals, or AI, automation and machine learning, and reducing the amount we need to work. But technologies alone won't do it. We also need politics. Otherwise, these magnificent technologies, a result of our species' astounding ingenuity, will merely reproduce existing social inequality. In 2015, we saw the first self-landing rocket. 3 months earlier, Alan Kurdi, a Kurdish refugee from Syrian Kurdistan, washed up dead on a beach in Bodrum. He was 3 years old. So the idea that you can have a world of unimaginable technology and also equally unimaginable suffering is already here, which is why I wrote the book, because we now need a political manifesto for a different kind of utopia, because the old ones no longer make sense. No individual or organisation can achieve goals without imagination, whether it's civil rights, universal suffrage, the 8-hour day, the weekend, modern democracy. These were once upon a time all unthinkable, impossible, and yet we did it. And that search for meaning is fundamental to humanity. And if the left doesn't provide it, the right will. But the centre most certainly won't, because they're still fixated with this idea of capitalist realism. The idea that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is the end of capitalism. 200,000 years, and yet this system, which has only been around for 200, apparently defines who we are. It doesn't. Since 2008, something very strange has happened. That year, we didn't just have the global financial crisis, it was the first time that the iPhone on 3G was launched. Since then, what's happened? Yes, we've seen rising inequality, the emergence of authoritarian populism, but we've also seen that digital economy go very much mainstream. Today, Amazon is a $1 trillion economy. Ditto Google. Ditto Microsoft. Facebook is worth hundreds of billions. This is new. The emergence of companies worth $1 trillion was unthinkable 10 years ago, and that simultaneously led to the rise of a global class of super rich. Jeff Bezos is worth more than $150 billion US. He's the wealthiest man on earth. 150 billion would pay for a lot. It would eliminate homelessness in the United States, eliminate malaria worldwide. He could cancel student debt in the US. He could do unthinkable things. What's he doing with the money instead? He's building a giant clock, which nobody can actually watch. He has a huge boat, which not even he probably uses. And if you think that Jeff Bezos having 150 billion is a lot of money, wait till artificial intelligence, because in the words of Mark Cuban, it will create the world's first trillionaire. Now, the alternative is we create a world of less work and enjoy far higher living standards than what we presently have. The most radical technologies around will only reproduce existing social relations, namely capitalism, unless they're accompanied by something else. In Britain, for instance, the Bank of England thinks 40% of jobs could be lost as a result of automation. You need a political response to that technology. Similarly, with synthetic biology and healthcare, 2003, we mapped the first human genome. It cost several $1 billion. Today, you can sequence your genome for around $100. In 10 to 15 years' time, sequencing your genome may cost the same price as a Mars bar. It means that we could probably eliminate thousands of single-cell conditions. Unless we have a politics which addresses it, these will be patented. They'll be treated exactly the same as pharmaceutical drugs, and that's why politics matters. So modern agriculture is one of the primary things driving climate change. We use more fresh water for meat than we do for ourselves. If we can transition to cellular agriculture, meat without animals and milk without cows, technology is already here, then we could feed a world of 10 billion, not just the bare essentials, but the most delicious meat imaginable. And we could do so using 90% less land, 90% less labour, 90% less water, and creating 90% less greenhouse gas emissions. But that can only happen if we change the operating system of human society. You can only access housing or food or medicine or education under market capitalism if somebody somewhere makes a profit. And if they don't, you don't get those things. Given the opportunities ahead, given the technologies at our disposal, and given the challenges also confronting us, that looks to me as increasingly absurd. These profound problems, homelessness, food banks, are socially manufactured. They're contingent on capitalism. The rights of access, of who gets what, is a political choice rather than one of social necessity. How do we get there? What do we need to do to move from the present day to a future which is much better? It's about socialising finance to ensure that resources get allocated to socially useful things rather than the casino economy of modern 21st century banking. It's about creating universal basic services where everybody can access universal and free housing, transport, education, healthcare and information. These could be extracted from commodity circulation. They wouldn't be subject to the logic of profit because they're human rights. If we do that, and quickly, we can address all the major challenges of the next several decades, and at the same time, we can create a far more just and prosperous society than the one we already live in. What these guys are doing at Double Down News is phenomenal. If you can, go to the Double Down News Patreon, give some resources to them, they're going to need it, but you're going to need them, a different kind of media. Nobody is going to do this for us, so be a part of that movement and help Double Down News become the kind of journalism we need.
In the modern political world, the terms left-wing and right-wing can often be heard and misunderstood. But what do these terms mean, and where do they come from? The terms left and right were first used in an ideological context during the French Revolution of the 18th century. Those on the left were in support of the revolution, and those on the right supported the monarchy. This idea of the left supporting change and the right wanting to keep the status quo continues today and is key in some of their philosophy. The difference between left and right-wing ideology fundamentally comes down to the balance between individual liberty and government power. The left strive for an equal society and believe that the state should play a substantial role in people's lives. This means increased regulation on business and higher taxes on the rich. The left also tend to hold more progressive views, often opposing the death penalty while supporting same-sex marriage and women's right to abortion. The left have more lenient views on immigration and are usually the driving force behind any separation of church and state. Economically, the left often follow the Keynesian, or as it's sometimes called, the interventionist school of thought. In brief, this system would have the government intervene to avoid an economic recession. This means taxing highly during good or boom times and spending this money when the economy truly needs it. The level of government interference varies by how far left it is, with communists wanting complete control over all aspects of the economy, whereas the centre-left want only moderate intervention. The right believe that a level of social inequality is inevitable, and think that the government should have a limited role in people's lives and business. This is, as the right believes, that preserving personal freedom should be the government's main goal and should not impose too many rules on people's lives. The right also tend to hold more traditional and religious attitudes than the left, often opposing things those on the left support, such as same-sex marriage and women's right to abortion. Economically, the right can often be seen using the new classical approach, which includes having a laissez-faire policy. This roughly translates to leave things alone and means less regulation to increase innovation and lower taxes to increase growth. In short, the right views government interference in business as a bad thing and thinks that the market prospers best when left to its own devices. Parties on the left include Labour, the Greens and the Democratic Party, while those on the right include the Republicans, Conservatives and the UK Independence Party. There is also a centre ground where parties like the Liberal Democrats lie. These parties hold views from both the left and the right. This all being said, the use of left and right to describe modern political parties is not always accurate. There are actually many different political spectrums that can be used to judge how far left or right a party is. Parties often judge themselves based on other current political parties. In this regard, Labour is often seen to be on the left and Conservatives are often seen to be on the right. In actual fact, lots of Labour policy actually places it in the centre or right of the political spectrum. The same is true in America, where both the Democrats and Republicans are on the right of the spectrum in political terms, even if the Democrats are sometimes seen as having more left-wing values. The political spectrum is also not just two-dimensional. Within both the left and the right, there are people who hold authoritarian and libertarian views. Authoritarians wish for greater government interference and libertarians want the opposite. As previously stated, the left tend to be authoritarian and the right tend to be libertarian, but this is not always the case. We are often taught the extremes of left-wing is communism and the extremes of right-wing is fascism. This is not strictly true, as the extreme authoritarian nature of fascist governments, combined with left-wing economic beliefs, make it hard to place on a political scale. While it is useful to have these labels in order to help the majority of people easily distinguish between different ideologies, it is also important to remember that they are not always accurate, and looking at the party's policy for yourself is often the best way to choose who gets your vote, rather than following a label blindly.
When someone's done a bad thing with fatal consequences, unless the crime's acknowledged, there's no hope of mending fences. So we hang our heads in sorrow and confess our collective guilt to you august Hibernians who proudly wear the kilt. We're so sorry, Scotland. We are covered in shame for the madness of Brexit. We're entirely to blame. With the choice of two boxes, we ticked self-destruct. Thus Britain is now comprehensively fucked. I'm so sorry, Scotland, to see such division. We are banking on you to reverse the decision. Although we were warned that this course was unwise, many Sassenach vampots believed all the lies. Oh, Scotland, deliver us from evil. Oh, Scotland, we were silly fools. Only you can save us from the evil. Please invoke some parliamentary rules. Mrs. Sturgeon, won't you be our saviour? Let's not rebuild Hadrian's Wall. Oh, Scotland, forgive our bad behaviour. United we stand, divided we fall. We're so sorry, Scotland, for the likes of Farage and his NHS millions, which were just a mirage. Oh yes, we're in a pickle. Come rescue us, Nicola, because as pickles go, this couldn't be Piccola. We're so sorry, Scotland, for the way people voted. There's no way that this bill can be sugar-coated. The union's future is is stuffed on all fronts. So it's hardly surprising that you think we're all cunts. Oh, Scotland, deliver us from evil. Oh, Scotland, we were silly fools. Only you can save us from upheaval. Please invoke some parliamentary rules. Mrs. Sturgeon, won't you be our savior? Let's not rebuild Hadrian's Wall. Oh, Scotland, forgive our bad behavior. United we stand, divided we fall. United we stand, divided we fall. United we stand.
You European Union, tally-ho, you f***ing pricks. We are the United Kingdom, you can eat our spotted dicks. That being said, we're not going to leave you. Turns out we need you nonetheless. You European Poland is depressing, and there's vampires in Romania. Spain is far too hot, and where the f is Lithuania? To be fair, Slovenia is lovely. We're only kidding, it sucks too. But we must admit, without these countries, we'd be really screwed. The European Union, even though we must admit we would all be batshit crazy if we vote for leaving it. We would all be batshit crazy if we vote for leaving it.
There's a ghost in the hallway, a skeleton closet, I'm sure, a haze that is haunting, a secret to shatter the earth. Take my hand now, don't be scared. For you I'll pretend, though I'm not prepared. Burying the question of my soul. Do I wanna know?
Bong. M? Or was it L? Believe. What happened here? Oh, just the normal drone about Brexit. Tea? Sure. Help yourself.
Bond, we need you back.
We?
Your country needs you.
My country? What is my country? Is it the Commonwealth, the former British Empire, Singapore, Hong Kong, India, Australia, America, Canada? Is it Great Britain, also known as Blighty, a single large island that includes England, Wales, and Scotland? Is it the UK, the United Kingdom, the same as Great Britain, but now with Northern Ireland added? Is it the British Isles, all of Great Britain, and now with all of Ireland? Is it part of Europe, a key founding member, soon to end with Brexit? Or is it just little old England? No Europe, no Scotland, no Ireland, no Wales. Just this. A quadriplegic torso without a head. Which may be all that's left after Wales, Scotland, and Ireland all leave us to rejoin Europe. Or is it just the idea of England? Cool Britannia. A flag used to sell milk tea. Honestly, Em, I don't know my country anymore.
Thank you.